Your top stories from Israel and surrounds with me, Rolene Marks, right here on the Israel Brief, just how we do it every Monday to Thursday, brought to you by Lay of the Land. And before we get into today's top stories, I just want to say a huge thank you to so many of you who have sent messages about my dodgy eye situation. Hopefully all will be back to normal relatively soon. And thank you to one of my favorite viewers who sent the tip about whiskey to help cure hiccups. It really helped, and I'll take a tip about whiskey any day of the week. But let's get into your top stories, and we begin with news that 11 have been arrested as clashes have broken out between police and Bedouins at a tree planting in the Negev. Today is the second day of forestation, which has seen clashes between the police and Bedouin, who say that the forestation project is encroaching on their land, and this could be creating a crisis for our coalition. The Ra'am party want this to stop, and one of their MKs, Walid Taha, says a solution needs to be reached soon. Now, yesterday, a delegation from the Likud and the far right started off the planting ceremonies, but and this is all under the auspices of the JNF, or Kakal as it's known here in Israel, and it is quite a controversial situation at the moment, and we are hoping that calm prevails and that we don't see another scenario like we saw last night with massive clashes and several fires being set. In other news, Israel's coronavirus numbers continue to soar, but in a press conference yesterday, addressing the nation, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said that Israel will keep our economy open. There are no plans to close our skies as the Omicron variant wreaks havoc through the country. Sheba Hospital announced that they have opened up the first corona ward for children, complete with classes and clowns, and doctors have warned parents not to be flippant about the Omicron variant, saying that although the illness might be mild, they are still concerned about long COVID. Meanwhile, over 400,000 people who are eligible to get their fourth vaccine have been vaccinated. Right now, those vaccines are still restricted to anybody over the age of 60, healthcare workers, and anybody who is immunocompromised. Now, we've been speaking a lot about our favorite subject here lately, which is the topic of the Abraham Accords and growing normalization and rapprochement with the Arab world. Earlier this week, I brought you the story that a bipartisan caucus has been formed in the U.S. Houses of Congress and Senate to push and promote normalization between Israel and Arab states. Well, in an interesting op-ed in today's Jerusalem Post, written by journalist Lahav Harkov, she examines whether or not the possibility of agriculture and agricultural cooperation is one of the reasons why ties are starting to warm up between Israel and Indonesia. Now, Israel and Indonesia don't have formal diplomatic ties, but Indonesia is the world's largest or most populous Muslim country. The two countries have cooperated in the past in defense, and there have been exchanges of visits, but this would really go a long way to growing the Abraham Accords, circle of peace. And we know that the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, on his recent trip to the capital Jakarta, discussed the possibility of normalization, but did warn that this process could take time. Now, several weeks ago, we brought you the story of young Blake Zadansky, 21-year-old student who was with a friend when they were beaten up and called dirty Jews outside a Foot Locker store in Brooklyn. Well, the NYPD have arrested 27-year-old Suleiman Othman from Staten Island and charged him with hate crimes. He is the protagonist responsible for beating Zadansky for wearing his his IDF sweatshirt. In response to this incident, thousands took to social media, including myself, to show solidarity with Zadansky, wearing IDF shirts and hats and sweaters. And several weeks ago, a protest took place in Brooklyn, protesting that that Jews should have the right to wear an IDF sweatshirt, and we shouldn't be discriminated against based on what we wear. So we're very happy that an arrest has finally been made. Those are your top stories making headlines today, but we are very active on our website. We have a whole whack of new content up there. The most recent being an article by Theon Grunspan taking a look at the history of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias at the BBC. We've been speaking about the Beeb quite a bit lately. You can find that on layoftheland.online. That's layoftheland.online. It's also on our Facebook page at Lottel site. Please help us grow our community by liking us or following us. And if it wouldn't be too much, can you help us do the same for our YouTube channel? You can find us at the Israel Brief, and all you have to do is click that red subscribe button and help us grow our outreach. We're also on Twitter at layoftheland5. That's at layoftheland with the digit 5, and we would love it if you follow us there and interact with us there as well. So with the Hump Day Wednesday edition of the Israel Brief, I'm Rolene Marks, and we'll check in with each other tomorrow for your top stories, maybe even without sunglasses.